And good morning. We are live, and I didn't change the go live time to 9 a.m., but that's when we're going live. We're back on Monday after a week off. We're live on YouTube right now. We're going to bring in our Facebook groups, Atlanta Falcons fans on All Falcons and Scott Kennedy Sports, before we get another episode of the Falcons Podcast. Welcome, and let's start that again. Welcome in, everybody. We are live, the Falcons Podcast on Monday morning. I'm Scott Kennedy. That is Nick Kendell on this side. We're back after a week off. We took a week off for a change. We don't typically do that. That's the first time I think we've missed both of us together in 2 years. Nick went to Hawaii. I went to the Dominican Republic. Both got in some nice water and came back to some cold weather. Nick, how are you doing?
Cold still, wet. We're apparently going to get some snow this week out here in Seattle, which is a rare occurrence thanks to how close we are to the Pacific Ocean and our elevation. But doing well. Been working a lot. And now that I'm back from that vacation, I am counting down the days until summer. A good friend of mine is coming out from Germany around Memorial Day weekend, and he's going to be out here for a couple weeks, and we're going to do a few different sites. So that's the next big exciting thing besides all the football stuff that we got going on here.
I say, okay, good, because we're about 2 months out from the NFL draft. We're just a little under a month away from free agency. Some of the things I wanted to get into today, we've talked about before, but I figured we'd just start, getting into it again, getting into it a little bit deeper. Pro Football Focus put out an article where they broke down every team, which they are wont to do, that said the team's biggest need, a player to cut, a free agent to keep, a tag, someone that could be franchise tagged. And I think there was one more in there and I've already forgotten, but we'll hit on all of those. And then also want to talk a little mock draft before we get out of here. So we're going to do about 30 minutes. That's about we'll spend just a little bit on each one of those topics before we get going. We'll say hello to some folks who have come in the chat. It says, good morning, Scott and Nick. That's Michael Ranquillo. He's up early with us in Arizona on the Falcons podcast. Good morning, Michael. Appreciate you being here. Nathan Floyd. Got that big G, says, good morning, guys. Good morning, Nathan. Kevin Mapp, missed you guys. Kevin says, good morning, guys. Good morning to you. And Joe Cannon, always with a great morning, Scott and Nick. I love that. Joe. Appreciate that. As you're coming in, hit that like button. Help share the love just a little bit so people can find us after we've been off. We didn't go away. We just took a Monday and a Wednesday off. And then Steve Kennedy coming in. So, we'll keep it all in the family here. One of the things I thought was interesting, Nick, when they said PFF, and let me drop that link in the chat for everybody. I like to share the love. If we're going to discuss the article, we might as well put the article in the chat. They said the biggest need. What would you consider the biggest need for the Atlanta Falcon? And we'll give a hint. They cheated. So I'm not going to let you cheat. What would you consider, Nick, the biggest need for the Atlanta Falcons going into the 2023 season?
This is such a hard question because I'm going to give you two answers because I cheat. There's an immediate need and there's a long-term need. The long-term need, until you know you have it, is franchise quarterback. Until you have that guy and you know you have him, that's the answer for me. I know it's a cheap answer, but it is what it is. I would be perfectly comfortable rolling into the next season with Desmond Ridder, but you don't know about him yet. Right. You're looking to gather more information, but what you've already done from an analysis perspective is he was worth a third-round pick when you were going into next year with just Marcus Mariota. It's changed a bit because you've had him around the facility and whatnot, but still, to me, it's franchise quarterback, number 1, 1A, 1B. Until you have that guy, you're wandering the desert. Beyond that, though, because that always is in its own bucket for me, is the defensive front. And I'm cheating there as well because it's defensive tackle and defense and edge. Falcons last year and the year before especially, but even still last year, not enough horses up front. The defensive tackle and specifically more so edge rusher, but also I'll lump defensive tackle in there as well. Grady Jarrett's getting older. Graham is coming off the significant injury. And then edge rusher, are these body types going to fit the new scheme under Nelson? So defensive front is number 1 for me.
I'll cheat a little bit too because my answer was pass rush. That was the, and how do you generate that pass rush, whether it's edge, is it inside? Typically it's edge. They put Easier. 2 picks last year, a second and a third into the edge position last year, and Arnold Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone. D'Angelo didn't play nearly as much. Arnold Ebiketie showed some good things. He flashed pretty well as a rookie. In fact, if he wasn't the top, he didn't necessarily have the sacks, but he had the pressures that were in there. I know James Houston was really good. undrafted free agent, if I'm not mistaken. I actually got to meet his parents during the pre-draft process, which was kind of cool. So I was like, hey, he had a hell of a year. Second, I think, in sacks, about 8 of them. Falcons need another edge for sure. Now, PFF cheated, and I'm going to say they cheated, but I'm going to back them up on this. Is they said everything. What are the Falcons' biggest need? Everything across the board. But then they really focused on the defensive side of the ball. But I'm not. I'm going to say they could, if you look at the premium positions, you could take a player at a premium position if you think he was a game changer, and the Falcons have a need there across the board, even quarterback, like you said.
Yeah.
The Atlanta Falcons official site did a rounded up 10 mock drafts. CJ Stroud was taken twice, which was the most of any player, was taken twice. Do you pass CJ Stroud if he falls to you at 8?
Probably not. You don't have enough information, like I said, about Desmond Ridder, and CJ Stroud is a top 10 worthy quarterback. Now, he's an interesting one, and I've said it on here before. A lot of people that haven't watched much Ohio State will come away from that Georgia game thinking, oh my God, this guy should be potentially number 1 overall. And that game was an outlier compared to what he was really good. No doubt. I mean, Heisman candidate, 2 years there at Ohio State out there in Columbus, Ohio. But his ability to be a playmaker and create just was never really there. He's perfectly comfortable most of the time being a static quarterback. Now, when you're as talent advantage as Ohio State is compared to most of their teams, maybe that's what they're asking him to do. He wasn't asking to do too much. It's what is Kevin, what's his face in Hitch? It's like, this is your happy zone with Will Smith. You don't need to do anything else. This is where you live. That was fine at Ohio State because you had, Marvin Harrison Jr., Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith in Jigba, So will be interesting to see how the evaluation for him plays out. But if he's there at 7 for the Falcons, right? 8, excuse me. Mm-hmm. If he's there at 8 for the Falcons, then I think you take him. I don't think he's going to be there at 8, though. I think somebody will probably trade up before he gets to 8.
I don't think he makes it past 4 in there somewhere. And again, he's in the neighborhood of number 1 for me. But like I said, quarterback, say, okay, you've used two premium picks, 2 top 10 picks on pass catchers. Well, you still need a wide receiver. So of those 10 drafts, wide receiver was not included in any of the players because there's not one. If there was one, if Marvin Harrison Jr. is in this class,
he wouldn't be there.
Yeah, there's going to be people mocking if he gets that far.
Yeah,
Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Falcons at 8. They could use another wide receiver. They could use another edge. They could use Jalen Carter on the defensive line, another big interior lineman, especially if they move more to a 4-3 front. They can, and Nick, I think you froze up on me just a little bit. I'll give you a second while I'm finishing this thought. There you go. They could use another corner opposite AJ Terrell. So even where they have good pieces, they need a complement. So you got Drake London and who? You've got an offensive tackle, I think, are the 2 that I might say are the most secure. But that brings us to the next point is a free agent to keep. Their answer for PFF was Caleb McGarry. That one's pretty obvious to me. Of the free agents to be from the Atlanta Falcons, most of those guys signed 1-year deals. Most of the veterans had 1-year deals. Of the guys that are being pending free agents, I can't even think of anybody else that would even be a contender of, oh yeah, got to have that guy back. Rashaan Evans was pretty good. Lorenzo Carter was pretty good. I'd bring him back. There's guys I would bring back. Abdullah Anderson. Yeah, sure. Good player. But Caleb McGarry's, there's no such thing as a must sign, but he's pretty close to bring back. And the other one was who's a possible franchise tag? Well, same guy. It'd cost you about $19 million on a 1-year deal. I'm not sure I want to pay Caleb McGarry $19 million. I'm hoping they get something worked out before then.
Yeah, and a lot of times the tag is more of just an exclusive negotiating window where, like we saw with the Broncos multiple times over the last decade, they tag somebody and then come July, a new contract is signed. So it's really just to extend that window. It does limit you some in free agency, but I don't think you need to worry about that so much as a Falcons fan this year with the amount of salary cap space that you have. If you have, let's say, $10 million less in a window, and then you going into like June, July, and then you sign McGarry and it lowers the cap hit, well, guess what? That rolls over into next year. You're probably not going to spend all that space this year anyway. So I think it's definitely something on the table for the Falcons if you believe McGarry is worth it. Now, you've heard me talk about it on here a little bit. I think PFF also mentioned as some of your warning signs, free agency.
Buyer beware.
Buyer beware. That's the phrase. Yep. Free agents in this class, Caleb McGarry being one of them, given how much the Falcons scheme protects him from some of his weaknesses on tape, some of his limitations. But yeah, he'd be a good get to bring back, especially because you're building something there on that offensive line. You're not looking to lose talent there. You have the money. Why would you let lose talent? It'd be more of an indictment on what they think of McGarry. But I would be pretty shocked if he's not back as long as the Falcons want him, because who's going to outbid them? I guess the only team I'd worry about is the Bears, but you have that tag there as well.
Yeah, if it comes down to it, I think they would tag him. I just hope it doesn't come to that. But I mentioned before, and I actually clipped it up separately because it was like January 4th, Nick, that you and I were on here. And I was like, all right, mark it down. 9 a.m., January 4th. This is my prediction. I still think they've already done some restructuring, but I think they could do a bigger restructure on Jake Matthews. God, I'm getting my guys confused. I haven't been here for a week. I'm like, Garrett Bowles? No, wrong guys. On Jake Matthews, because his cap hit is so huge right now that they could have enough savings in there. They could knock his cap hit by 20 million, literally, and sign Chris Lindstrom to an extension and re-sign Caleb McGarry and still be cap neutral compared to where they are now. That's a pretty good place to be. Now the player that they talked about, the who gets cut, this one was obvious. In fact, I kind of made fun of, I don't remember who it was. It was ESPN or something. They said the big offseason prediction was Marcus Mariota is going to get cut. I'm like, that's your big prediction? Shoot, that was predictable the day he signed that he wasn't going to see year 2 of that contract. And it became really obvious when at the press conference, when, Arthur Smith was pretty pissed that Marcus Mariota was no longer with the team. So Marcus Mariota is definitely going to be cut unless you can find a trade partner. And I don't think that's really even going to be possible at $14 million on a guy coming off a knee injury with the perception that he walked out on his team. Not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I can't even think of another candidate that would make sense for this window for the Falcons. So I guess they could have listed not anybody instead. But yeah, I think Marcus Mariota, good as gone. Apparently he's a great guy. Held the roster down there for a year on a team that didn't have much expectations. Sounded like he was good in the locker room. Can't ask for much more. But yeah, Jason L coming in saying the shoulder throw, LMFAO, that Carolina game. So yeah, no, good as gone. Cut candidate.
Butt throw.
Yeah, more of that was a great show of something. All right, but yeah, no, it's thanks Mariota. We hardly knew you. Forgettable season, but a season that hopefully is a stepping stone towards the right direction for the Falcons.
And just a reminder to hit that like button on your way in, because the stream is starting to open up a little bit and our numbers are increasing. So I want to say hello to some folks that have come in. Sensen, Aki Dragon, one of our Broncos fans, said, hope you both enjoyed time off. Thank you, Aki Dragon. Bradley Conger saying good morning. Good morning to you as well. Roderick Cook says, afternoon, guys. Glad to hear some Falcons talk. And we are glad to be talking some Atlanta Falcons. Gabriel Rodriguez says, Jesse Bates is coming to Atlanta. How do you feel about the possibility of Jesse Bates' safety coming to the Atlanta Falcons, Nick?
You have a lot of money to spend. That's for damn sure. Typically, if you're working within the margins, I'm not looking to pay a non-premium position big money on the open market, and I think he's going to cash in big time, but he is a very, very good player and could do a lot of good on that team. I'm curious to see what the exact scheme Steven Nelson's going to run out there. I think Jesse Bates is a really good scheme fit for that more Vic Fangio style defense where you're looking for safeties who aren't just, filling one role. He's not just a deep center field free safety. He's not just to come down and play the box strong safety type. He's a little bit of everything out there with his size and versatility. So if he's available, I'd be interested, no doubt, because you want to get good players in there in Atlanta. But I don't know if safety's where I'm looking to spend the most of my money right now. I'm looking at the defensive line, maybe also cornerback as well, depending on what's available. The defensive line is where if I'm Atlanta, I'm paying big money, and especially with Steven Nelson, the defensive coordinator, with his connections. The nose tackle from the Saints maybe is an option out there, and also Marcus Davenport. I think those are the ones that I'm looking for right now, given the connections.
Did he turn down a franchise tag or threaten not to play on it last year?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And that's not quite as high at safety as some of the other positions, but it's still a decent chunk of change. They could use him. I mean, Eric Harris, God bless him, is a solid pro. But I've said the Falcons are shopping in the veteran minimum bargain bin the last 2 years. They can step that up this season. They're looking at around $60 million before making any moves, including clearing about $12 million in salary cap space with Marcus Mariota. Achy Dragon comes into question. This is kind of a question that just won't die. Lamar Jackson. Quarterback Lamar Jackson, the longer this drags on, the less likely it seems that he's going to end up with the Baltimore Ravens. That said, less is a relative term. I still think they are heavy favorites to retain the services of Lamar Jackson. 3 first-round picks and $150 million guaranteed. It's probably about what it would take to get Lamar Jackson. Is that worth it to you, Nick?
3 first-round picks is such a heavy price when you're going to be paying that much money as well. But you don't have a franchise quarterback. I think he's just such an enigma because his play style is so different than any other quarterback. Like, how is that going to age? We've seen it this past season. I mean, he got injured and then that team fell off. So it's definitely a tough one. I don't know how desperate are you if you can maybe send over some cash instead to Baltimore or some cap space, eat a bad contract or something. I'd be interested in. 3 first-round picks is a hell of a price. If I could do, 2 first-round picks and plus more to keep that 2025 first-round pick, I would. That third one, I guess I'll put it this way. I'm not going to let that 3rd first-round pick keep me away from getting a better quarterback in there, especially with how this team is set up right now, especially with the size guys they have and how they can run power. I mean, I think he'd be an awesome fit in this scheme. And also the NFC South is there for the taking. So I guess I talked myself into it. 3 first-round picks, big contract. I'd be okay with it. There's obviously the art of the deal in there. You want to negotiate a little bit, but I would be interested.
It's too much for me.
Yeah.
At this stage of the Falcons rebuild, it's too much for me. When you become that dependent on the quarterback, it really becomes, you'd have, unless you use Ritter as part of the trade, you'd have Ritter. So that might be okay. But I just feel like you end up becoming too one-player dependent. If you give up all of that money, you'd eat up into a big part of your cap space. So how do you address the defense? The offense would be good. The offense is pretty well set for me. Another wide receiver, and you're in decent shape on the offensive side of the ball. But the defense is a mess. And the San Francisco 49ers were in a position where they thought they could give up 3 first-round draft picks for a quarterback, and to do that for a Trey Lance, for an unproven rookie playing 1 season in FCS ball was bold, let me say. But they had so many pieces around them that they were a quarterback away. They were literally a quarterback away. The Falcons aren't. If something happens to, and we saw what happened. The 49ers went through 4 quarterbacks, and they were still a really good team. If the Falcons make that trade, it's all on Lamar Jackson. And if Lamar Jackson, something happens to him, the team's toast. It's too risky for me, Nick. I think I would want to use that money and those draft picks to build up the team around them. And then in 2 years, if you've got a San Francisco 49ers, a Philadelphia Eagles type of roster that you've built, then maybe I don't care about the next. I don't necessarily need the F them picks of the Rams. I've got my team. I don't need the draft picks, and I can afford it with the salary cap. But for me right now, it's too early for Lamar Jackson. Not yet. It's too big a risk for me.
For sure. And I think part of it also is how I am viewing this draft class. I think that 8 overall most seasons is more valuable than 8 overall this season, but you still might be able to get a bit more value because it is the 8 overall pick in this draft cycle. So I think I would be interested in it. And just because I really want to see it. Also, I think it'd be really fun in the Arthur Smith offense with the way they are able to run the football and the ability to have these big emerging weapons. I mean, with how good Lamar Jackson was with Mark Andrews, you upgrade that with a Kyle Pitts, you give him a Drake London. You probably are able also to entice a wide receiver to come here because Atlanta is a bustling, exploding metropolitan area with Lamar Jackson as a brand there. I mean, I would want to be a part of that. So I would be, I think I would. It's a tough decision though, because it's going to hurt. It's going to be costly to do that.
All right. Now let's talk draft just a little bit again. And then I want to get back into the chat some, because you mentioned, the style of offense you're running. You've got Ritter here. Okay. So that's worst case scenario. That's not bad.
No.
Ritter could end up being the guy. What if Will Levis sits there at 8? what if Anthony Richardson, who should be there at 8, but there's no guarantee that he will be, Anthony Richardson playing in this offense without any real pressure to come in and play right away could be really intriguing for Arthur Smith and the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, 100. Absolutely. I think that Will Levis, it just sounds like everybody that's really connected to the NFL circles makes it sound like he will not be there. He's beloved of his personality, his work ethic, everything he's overcome, playing last season through multiple injuries, a terrible roster around him there in Kentucky too. So I think he won't be there for you guys at 8, but there is a conversation about Anthony Richardson. He's one of the most physically gifted quarterback prospects I think I can remember since Cam Newton, maybe Josh Allen area. He's different still, but like as far as the levels of arm talent, athleticism, flexibility, power, the frame, it's all there. Listening
I'm
to
mixed up on my years. I think of Andrew Luck as being the total package, but I don't remember who came first in that group too. But Andrew Luck was one of those guys too.
Cam Newton 2011, Andrew Luck 2012.
Okay.
They were back to back because Andrew Luck was potentially going to be the number 1 overall pick in that 2011 class, and he decided, you know what? Nah, I'm going to go back for my senior year of Stanford, and then goes to the Colts. But I digress. Richardson, really interesting player, a lot of tools. I mean, some of the stuff he does is supernatural. He's inconsistent as all get out. One red flag here I have from Dane Brugler is there's been some talk about his mental makeup as far as his tenacity. Not that he doesn't work hard, but sometimes maybe a little bit doesn't have that dog in him, if you will, I guess. And this is completely hearsay and intangible stuff. It's stuff that's not, you can't like measure and anything like that. But when it comes down to quarterbacks, you're going to have to figure out what makes them tick. We've seen it with a few guys now. You can have all the tools in the world, but you have to be almost a sociopath level want and desire for that position. And if he passes those tests for me, absolutely sign me up. I'd be interested in bringing him in at 8. You're going to have to take a swing at a quarterback at some point, unless Ritter ends up being the guy. But based on historical data, 3rd round pick at quarterbacks don't tend to hit. So you might not ever be this high again also. So I would be interested if you're going to put in the evaluations on all these guys. I don't think Levis or Stroud will be there. Richardson, perhaps. And if the real question is, if you like one of these guys enough, are you interested in moving up a little bit for one of them? Because there's going to be people who are chomping at the bit to go up and get a quarterback. Maybe even have to jump the Raiders at 7 to go get a guy.
Well, and that's what I don't know if it was Roderick or someone said if CJ Stroud's there at 8, trade down because someone else would want CJ Stroud. I'm telling you, I think there's a big argument for CJ Stroud at number 1 overall. I'm one of those guys who knew what he could do, saw it in Georgia against Georgia. I'm like, that's a guy, rising to the occasion like that. Now, again, is he that good, or was it a combination of a guy getting hot? Question in here from, and I just went down through it. I think it was Joe Cannon coming in. He says, what are our chances of landing Daron Payne from Washington in free agency? That's a name I hear a lot connected with the Bears as well. The Bears and Falcons are going to be competing on a lot of guys because they both have needs everywhere and they both have a ton of money. Daron Payne, now I didn't watch a ton of Washington this year. PFF wasn't all that impressed with him, but I hear him as a guy who could be a big-time contributor as a free agent. Obviously, the Falcons need interior line help. What about Daron Payne?
He'd be a good get. I would be, again, it's a not what you know league, but a who you know league. And the fact that there's Amunawada, probably butchered the hell out of his name, the nose tackle from the Saints out there, who your new defensive coordinator has a lot of firsthand experience with as the former defensive line coach in the Saints, makes me lean that way. But Payne, being a former first-round pick from Alabama, had some good time out there at Washington. He's been floated around as a trade candidate. I don't know if he's been truly an impact player, but he's a very darn good player out there, and it has been a good player as well. So, yeah, if you have the cash to spend and you want to get a really good player on the defensive line, I think he'd be a really good addition to this unit. I would potentially, again, lean to the guy from the Saints, but Payne would be good.
Iowa edge, Lucas Van Ness was someone that I think you were probably first on as an Iowa guy, hyping him up. And then you're like, whoa, not that high. Come on. We saw him mocked at 8. He was one of the guys that wasn't in this mock draft. Again, the guys that were mocked, the Atlanta Falcons did one. Check out their sites, atlantafalcons.com. They do a compilation of 10 mock drafts, and there were 6 players. CJ Stroud was in there twice. Tyree Wilson was in there. Skoronski was in there twice, I believe. Offensive line, Paris Johnson, offensive line, Joey Porter Jr., cornerback, Miles Murphy, and I'm probably forgetting somebody, edge. So it's all over the place.
Tyree
And
Wilson.
yes, you can fit somebody else. Whoever they get will be at a premium position, at a position of need. It's almost impossible not to, unless they sign McGarry, but re-sign McGarry and draft Skoronski. But as you've talked about before, and then hit on both of these, Nick, Skoronski could play guard. He could drop in at left guard, maybe even center, and turn a strength, which is the Atlanta Falcons offensive line, into a superpower.
Yeah. And it gives you long-term flexibility across the unit. I mean, you have some really good pieces here on that offensive line. You've invested in it. It's looked really good. They do a damn good job of the scheme protecting them as well. But Jake Matthews, I mean, he's not going to play forever. You have questions long-term about the likes of Caleb McGarry there at right tackle for now. The only one you feel, for sure is going to be here for the next 5+ years is the right guard there. So if he's there at 8 and you love him, especially in this draft class, if you want to hit for a double there at 8, I don't think that's the worst thing overall, because it's like you can swing for the fences. That's fine sometimes. But if you can get a guaranteed double, as much as a guarantee as you could possibly, and have a true building that offense.
All right, Nick, I'm going to move on. Your internet took a little bit of a drag there, but I think you're ready. We'll move on to Van Ness. I know you're still high on Lucas Van Ness, but at 8, do you think that's a little too high for him, or do you like the long-term valuation? See a guy that would get I don't want to say bust, but would expectations be too high for him in his first year, or could he deliver? Go in and get 8 to 10 sacks as a rookie. We saw it happen. There were 2 guys, I think, last year that had 8, including undrafted free agent James Houston.
Anything can happen. I feel like early on, he's probably more of a rotational guy that is trying to figure out all the aspects of the game. Iowa didn't play him too much on first and second down. So despite his size, the edge setting ability is still a question mark. They really let him pin his ears back out there, but you're drafting him and you're basing it on traits. In this class, he has exceptional burst for his size, 6'5", 275 in length. I mean, you can go back, and if you're looking for like highlights out there, there are reps of him putting potential top 10 pick Paris Johnson Jr. on his butt, just embarrassing him with the amount of power that he is able to play with, and also Peter Skoronski. So obviously the offensive lineman won the reps as well there, but like the upside with Van Ness is as good as any edge rusher in this class, not named Will Anderson, but I think it's more of it's a long-term projection with him. And as far as him, would the expectations be too high for him at 8? Probably early on. But that's kind of the reality of where this class is. I think like after the top 6 picks, the selections from about 7 all the way to 20 could be guys that you could shuffle and be like, okay, well, it seems early, but that's also the range that they're going. That's just kind of where this draft class seems to be setting up right now. So he'd be a very good player. He'd be a different type of edge rusher than the Falcons have right now as well. A little bit more of that power length aspect that this team is with hand in the dirt ability. Inside outside too. I mean, he's been a really good at Iowa playing 2 years ago, his redshirt freshman season. They line him up on the interior defensive line a lot, and he had a lot of pressures and sacks from the interior as well. So he's a unique, fun, athletic upside pick with versatility, but he's still a project.
I've mentioned this before. A guy that sounds a lot to me like was David Pollock out of the University of Georgia. David Pollock was a freshman All-American at defensive tackle. Then he was a two-time. I think he stayed all 4 years, I think, but he was then All-American at defensive end, and then he was drafted as an outside linebacker in the first round. Edge, outside linebacker, whatever they're calling him at the time. So a lot there. David was more compact, strong as an ox, maybe the strongest player I've ever seen, for power to weight ratio, and quick, super quick. Van Ness is different in that he's a little bit longer and has the size of a more traditional end, but similar type of production through the years. So we've got to get going here in just a moment. Wanted to say hello to Nathan saying, I don't see, and Chris Walker on Facebook. Good morning, Chris. He says, I don't see Carter Anderson make it to 8. Carter Anderson, Will Anderson, and Jalen Carter, they're not making it out of the top 5. If 3 quarterbacks go top 5, the other 2 picks will be those 2. And here's one quick, we're going to end on this one from Millie Mills. If you don't go after Lamar Jackson, I understand. If not, draft whoever at 8. Exactly. Whoever you think is the best player available at 8, for sure, but hopefully, and this is the one that got my attention, Tank Dell is there in the second round. I would imagine he is. And I think Tank Dell, wide receiver, small, quick, jitterbug type, is exactly the type of wide receiver that the Falcons need right now to go along with their twin towers, the big bodies, Nick.
Yeah, I like Tank Dell. I think that second's a little early for my taste, given how high the Falcons will be picking, but he had a really good time down there in the Senior Bowl. I'm guessing they're going to be better receivers there for this class at the Falcons' second-round pick. But if Tank Dell's your guy, Millie Mills, who am I to say you're wrong? Wide receiver, I will admit, is probably my weakest position in terms of my evaluation ability. So certainly, I just feel like there's probably going to be guys that I will like more there in the second. And I agree with you, Scott. You're kind of looking for that jitterbug. I'm looking for somebody who can do a little bit more perimeter speed stuff out there versus like the more shifty speed slot. That Tank Dell probably is somebody that has speed that also can probably handle press from time to time. That way you're not limited in your formations out there. But that's just me and my preference there. You Falcons, like we said earlier to start the show, PFF, what's their need? Everything. Just bring in talent. The rest of it, yep. Shouldn't be picky. I see Kevin Mapp coming in saying go defense. Sure, if defense is the best player, but if the best player is offensive line, defensive line, tight end, I mean, with how this team loves to use 12 personnel, sure, bring in talent. Bring in talent. It's really simple this year for me.
And it's nice because you're going to have a ton of money, 5 draft picks in the top 150, and a solid nucleus. The offensive line improvement to me is the biggest reason for optimism moving forward. That was my biggest reason for pessimism the last 2 years when you're drafting receivers. I'm like, your offensive line is a disaster. Who cares who you're getting at receiver? Offensive line is really good right now. On that note, it was really good to be back. We've got to go. We're going to jump over to Mile High Huddle and talk some Broncos here for the next hour or so. If you'd like to join us and continue the talk, I know some of y'all will definitely come over. Hit us up on Mile High Huddle at YouTube. Nick and I will be back Wednesday morning to talk coast-to-coast football at 9 a.m. So it was great being back. Thank you for joining us. Hit the comments, hit the like button, hit the share button, and we will be all over the comments. So if you want to get some clarification or anything on some of the things we've said or a question, hit up the comments. I will be posting a ton of my Senior Bowl video highlights. I'm a week behind. They will start rolling out this week as well. So we will see you on YouTube. We'll see you on Facebook, and we'll see you Wednesday morning. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Peace.